there is no greater honor for me than to speak to those who defend freedom, democracy, and the peace in arms. The friendship and alliance of our two countries are founded on shared ideals, culture, art, and the faith, but above all are strengthened by the blood shed by thousands of American soldiers who crossed the ocean twice in the last century to help their forefathers in their struggle against absolutism and fascism. The friendship and alliance of our two countries are made indissoluble also by the presence of your army in Europe, which secured us from the aggressive aim of the Soviet communism in the past and from those of their irresponsible heirs today. So thank you again, also on behalf of the Italian government and the people. Today's topic may seem, as I said, peculiar. After all, as I am a Minister of Justice, I am usurping the task of my defense colleague. But it stems from my personal interest, which goes back many decades in history in general and in the history of World War II in particular. And in this area, the role of the U.S. Army and its generals has been essential and decisive. The U.S. was the arsenal of the democracy with its enormous power, financial and industrial power. But victory is not only achieved by industrial and material resources, but individual intelligence and courage are necessary. Here's the question: who was the best general in World War II? The range would be wide. The one I have a greater liking for is Tony McAuliffe, who, like Cambronne, responded with a better word to the Germans' demand for surrender in the Battle of Bulge when he was seized at Bastogne. However, in my opinion, the judgment should take into account several criteria: strategic vision, operational capability, aptitude for leadership, and above all, that sensitivity necessary to keep a coalition united during the battle and to convert the enemy into an ally after victory. This is why I narrowed down the short list of candidates to fight the protagonists: George Marshall, Ike Eisenhower, Chester Nimitz, the Admiral, George Patton, and Douglas MacArthur. Of course, I will confine myself to the role played during and immediately after World War II. The meritorious work of Marshall, who saved Europe from economic ruin, and of President Ike, who led the U.S. to maximum prosperity, are beyond the scope of this reflection. So let's start with George Marshall. He was the architect of the formidable war machine that led America to victory. In just a few years, he transformed a limited and inexperienced military structure into a colossal army of 10 million men, trained, equipped, and commanded in the best possible way. He knew how to choose the most suitable generals for the various tasks and had the authority to dismiss, in fortunately rare cases, the less capable men. He fervently desired, as the crowning achievement of his career, to command the troops on the field of Europe. Roosevelt would have allowed him to do so, but let him know that he wouldn't rest easily unless he was at his side here in Washington. With a high sense of duty, Marshall left Eisenhower the honor of leading the crusade in Europe. We cannot know how he would have conducted it, but we can imagine that he would have done it in the best possible way. The second is David Eisenhower. He was a mere colonel when the war broke out, and the Marshal was a four-star general. He was therefore planning, Eisenhower, a peaceful retirement when he was called upon for his well-known organizational and diplomatic skills to the various roles which culminated in his appointment as a supreme commander in Europe. Ike, who had never led a platoon, directed a series of campaigns in Africa, Sicily, Italy, and France that led to the defeat of the Third Reich. The British wanted the command to be given to Montgomery, who was more experienced and crowned with victories. Roosevelt and Churchill, with the assembled chiefs of staff, chose Ike not only and not so much because in 1944 the U.S. had superior resources to those of the Commonwealth, but because Ike and he alone possessed the necessary skills to give unity of strategy, direction, and unity to the disagreements of the various allies. The controversy between Patton and Montgomery over the strategy for invading Germany in the fall of 1944 is well known because each of them wanted to attack their own fronts. Monty tried and was defeated at Arnhem. Patton was stopped by Eisenhower and probably avoided a similar debacle. As we would have seen some months later, the German army was very, very strong also in autumn of 1944. So it was wise from Eisenhower to stop the Willow Pass. In conclusion, winning prudence was therefore Ike's strategy, but it was still a prudent strategy. And from Alexander to Hannibal, up to Caesar and Napoleon, prudence is not the most important quality of a great military leader. The third is Chester Nimitz. Who replaced Admiral Kimmel as a commander of Pacific Fleet after the Pearl Harbor attack. Even today, Kimmel's responsibility is disputed, and in any case, the responsibility was not him alone. Nevertheless, it was the right choice. Nimitz proved to be far-sighted in strategy, effective in tactics, and skillful in his choice of subordinates. The names of Halsey and Spruance, the two field commanders, show that Nimitz had the gift of relying on the best man. His big break was the Battle of Midway, which was to be to the American Navy what El Alamein was to the British Army. This is not the beginning of the end, but the end of the beginning, as Churchill said. The change of tide that would carry the Marines almost to the shores of Japan, to Tarawa, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa, began from Midway. Midway was essential in Nimitz's victory. He relied on the skill of his intelligence men like Spruance, who had only commanded the cruisers. Admiral Spruance was only commander of cruisers. He had never commanded aircraft carriers, but the choice of Nimitz was right. So Nimitz demonstrated a great strategic vision also at a later time, by the leapfrogging strategy, he avoided all Japanese garrisons that would have put up such a costly and futile resistance. His only misfortune was to cross paths with Douglas MacArthur, who was aiming for the Southwest Pacific. Roosevelt tried to bring them together and eventually succeeded because America had the capacity to meet the needs of both. In the end, the atomic bomb brought the matter to destruction. The fourth is George Patton, who was the best known general, at least on the European scene, both for his undisputed military ability and his exuberant character bordering on the picturesque. His career was conditioned but not cut short by a series of incidents that seemed trivial to many observers, but which for a democracy nurtured by ideals such as American one were intolerable. He had slapped a couple of soldiers hospitalized for psychological stress, calling them cowards. Ike forced him to apologize publicly, but he didn't give up the best of his field commanders. In early August 1944, his Third Army broke through the German front at Avranches, France, and from there a gallop began that took it to the German borders within a month. No German general, neither Guderian or Rommel, had gained so much ground in such a short time. Patton was certainly aided by air supremacy and by the attrition of the Nazi forces in Normandy due to the stubborn resistance before Montgomery in the Gap of Falaise. But without Patton audacity and strength, the front would have stabilized on the sand River Seine. But the most glorious moment was yet to come. On 16 December 1944, the Nazis waged the Battle of Bulge that found the Ardennes front unprepared. Patton performed a miracle. In 48 hours, he changed the direction of an entire corps of 90 degrees and ordered to reverse course to free Bastogne, and he succeeded. He would have liked to die as a soldier, I quote, by the last bullet of the last battle of the last war. But the destiny, fate, made him victim of a trivial car road act. He is now buried there in Luxembourg, next to his boys. A few months ago, I went to lay the flowers there. And then, fifth, Douglas MacArthur. He was the son of general. He was born inside the military fort and was wrapped in a blanket, having an elusive meaning. He would become a hero. In fact, he was the youngest general in the army, and during World War I, he commanded a legendary division in Europe. Shortly afterwards, he became chief of staff of the army. After retirement, due to the age, he was put in charge of organizing the armed forces in the Philippines. He was recalled to active duty at the outbreak of a war. The Japanese besieged him in a corridor, and MacArthur wanted to hold out with his soldiers. But Roosevelt ordered him to leave. He obeyed reluctantly and said, I will be back. In fact, he came back 3 years later and was greeted by the Philippines as a hero. He planned the Southwest Pacific operation, and his disagreement with the Nimitz was settled, as I said, directly by Roosevelt. But his merits in the final victory were officially recognized when, aboard the USS battleship Missouri, he received, on behalf of all Allied forces, the unconditional surrender from the Japanese. After the war, he remained there in Japan as a proconsul and inspired a new constitution, and made the Japan's America's most reliable ally in the East. MacArthur sums up the qualities of strategist, tactician, and diplomat that we have seen distributed but not brought together in the great figures recalled so far. He was also a great speaker. His last speech to the cadets at West Point equals Thucydides and Churchill's speeches. I have listened to his duty on our country many times, and each time I am moved by such vigor in terms of courage and the richness of inspiration. For this reason, in my opinion, he was the best commander. And yet, this is too a partial judgment, because the real star of the World War II was not a general or an admiral. It was the American soldier. Just what MacArthur defined was one of the noblest figures, not only as one of the finest military characters, but also as one of the most stateless. When I think, MacArthur said, of his patience under adversity, of his courage under fire, and his modesty victory, I am filled with an emotion and admiration I cannot put into words. To him, and to the thousands of crosses that commemorated him in our Europe and in my country, we owe the most heartful and the profound gratitude for having helped us to regain democracy and rebuild peace. Thank you.